Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Chess King TV here. Today I will be giving a quick tutorial on how to play the Queen's Gambit for white. Let's get it. So our first move is going to be pawn to d4. If black responds with pawn to d5, which is one of the most popular ways to defend against the Queen's Gambit, we go straight into our second move, which is moving our pawn from c2 to c4. And basically, this is the Queen's Gambit. This is as simple as it can get. So what is a gambit, I guess, would be a very important question that you can ask. And basically, it's an offering of a pawn, right? I'm basically trying to offer this pawn. So if black responds with like d takes c4 here, because black can capture on the c4, now black has removed his only center pawn in the center. So if black plays d takes c4, we can go immediately with pawn to e4. And basically what this does is it takes full control of the center with these four squares, right? And so that's pretty much the most, common idea on why we are trying to give up this c4 pawn. And so basically, the most popular lines, I should say, nowadays is actually not to take the pawn for black, but rather to actually defend it with like, pawn to e6 or like pawn to c6, as both of these moves defend the pawn. So if I were to capture, black can recapture, and then this is a perfectly fine game for both sides. But I think black's definitely definitely a little bit more comfortable with an exchange variation, in my personal opinion. So basically, there's so let's say, we look at the capture here, right? If black does take here, black already there's some tricks up white's sleeve. Like for instance, if white were to just play pawn to e3, and black tries to hold on to the pawn, right? Because, basically in one move, we're wanting to capture the pawn with our bishop. But, let's say that black sees that and black, wants to try to hold on to the pawn and get a little greedy with it. Well, this actually is going to be a mistake for black. And so basically, the idea here is that, yes, this may look like a good move initially. It's actually not that good, because now white makes a really good move here. And basically, in order to find this move, for white, we want to take this c4 pawn. We want to. But, we can't do it now, because then obviously we'll just lose our bishop, and there goes our bishop. But in order for us to take this c4 pawn, we need to get rid of the b5 protector. And so we do so by playing pawn to a4, right? And so basically we're offering him to take again. But if he takes again, then we get the recapture on the c4 square, and we get a pretty nice game. We have two pawns that are already controlling, influencing the center. We have a bishop out, and we're going to get very nice play, knight to f3, knight to c3, and we're going to get a pretty nice king safety, an early castle on the king side. So again, basically, it's not very good for black to get into one of these lines. Again, if we were to look again at, let's say, a4 attacking the pawn, but he doesn't want to recapture, and let's say that he plays something like pawn to c6, well, now it's already too late to try to go into defensive mode, because after a takes b5, c takes b5, this whole entire diagonal becomes weak for black, and white gets to take immediate initiative by going queen to f3, immediately attacking the rook on a8. And there's no way to defend against white's threat, which is just simply to capture the rook. I mean, yes, there are a couple ways to save the rook, but essentially Black's has to give something up here. So Black could play knight to c6, in which we could just take. And I guess the best continuation would be bishop to d7, attacking the queen. And now we can't take here because the queen is protected. But at this point, it doesn't matter. We can go back, queen to f3. And now we're up a whole piece. And that's amazing. If you could definitely win in exchange or just win a whole minor piece in the opening, you're definitely doing a good job. So basically, yeah, I mean, so after e3, you know, it's in Black's interest if he doesn't try to hold on to this c4 pawn, but rather just let it go, play something like knight to f6 or pawn to c5, and, you know, try to play for the center. Now, like I said, I don't really recommend anybody capturing this pawn for if you're playing in Black's perspective. I really don't recommend capturing. Instead, I highly recommend protecting this threat here. You know, and I really wouldn't call it a threat, but you know, it's always best to protect your pawn with another one of your pawns. You know, so there is this knight to f6, but for right now, we're just gonna look at, you know, pawn to e6 or pawn to c6. And basically, white just wants to continue in the queen's gambit with knight to c3. Now we have, you know, one minor piece developed for white. And this is pretty much what the queen's gambit is all about. You know, it's all about giving up or trying to give up this c4 pawn, as well as getting the queen side pretty much developed more quickly than the king side. So the knight to f6 is a good response here for Black, and we can get our pawn to e3. We could play knight to f3. So there's definitely multiple ways to carry out this line. So you don't need to feel like you need to follow one certain line. There's definitely different lines you could play in the queen's gambit. But you know, for this video, we're just gonna look at knight to f3, which is a very solid move. It's, you know, the general concept. You want to move your knights before you want to move your bishops. So you know, knight moves in the opening are definitely generally good, or better over your bishop move. So we have knight to f3. We have pawn to e6. So this is kind of going into what's known as the semi-solve for Black. Again, we're not going to get too crazy into this line. We're generally just trying to look at the general concept for white, right? So in the queen's gambit, like I said, we're really trying to give up this c4 pawn. That's the main idea here. We want our opponent to capture on c4. Now, you know, if he doesn't, it's not like we're in trouble or anything like that. And in fact, we get a pretty nice game for white. So, and you know, Black's perfectly fine here as well. So we have knight to f3. We have multiple moves here. Black could play bishop to b4, bishop g5, castle e3, you know, and basically, you know, yeah, I mean, that's the queen's gambit for you. I don't want to get, you know, too far into it, as this video is just pertaining to the opening, but that's going to be your first three moves: d4, c4, and knight c3. And you're pretty much going to do those three moves in response to anything that your opponent does, for the most part. Now, you know, there are some lines, you know, some direct or immediate lines that you might have to immediately respond to, like this move where, you know, you can't really just go for the c4 in the queen's gambit, because then he could just take here, and this is not something that we would really be interested in doing. So I mean, and of course, this is not the most popular line. In fact, this is some I would even consider a rare line that Black would play, a very aggressive line. But you know, basically your more popular lines are going to be like d5, just meeting the pawn, the d4 pawn with d5, which is also influencing the center and stuff like that. So yeah, that's gonna be it for this video. If you guys liked it, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. And yeah, until then, I will see you guys next time.